some scratching at my neck won't leave me alone. Will you see yourself back in the sun? The light it stings while the night it sings to me. An abnormal how a story I can't tell, but they'll see the gift they've given to me. I could step aside, I could end this life, but this disease, it won't release, it won't be cured by the night. I guess I'm never coming back. I'm owning on death.
Welcome, everyone, to the St. Pete by Night Twitch stream where we play St. Petersburg by Night, a massive multiplayer 5th edition chronicle set in the world of darkness in St. Petersburg, Florida. This, however, is After Dark, where we go behind the scenes, we raise the curtain, we part and dispel of the veil between what is fiction and what is reality, and we let you into the inner workings of St. Pete by Night and how we make this game possible. My name is Kent, also known as Misha Kent on all social media, but that's not important. What you should do is you should go follow St. Pete by Night on all social media. You can see some of our social media listed down below. And if you're a big fan of what you see here tonight, you should join us. Come join us on Discord. It's discord.gg/St. Pete by Night. You can become a part of this amazing community, a part of this amazing game. And yeah, you can see what it's all about for yourself. Tonight, however, I'm especially excited because I have a very special guest making her third appearance on St. Pete by Night. We have Rebecca, who goes by many pseudonyms. One of those being Bombclancey, another one being Rebecca Boom, another one being Mimic for Hire, another one being Sire for Hire. But you know what? Enough out of me. Let's let Rebecca introduce herself. Say hi, Rebecca. Can't hear you for some reason.
Hello, good evening.
Good
Yeah, sometimes
evening.
when you're muted, it doesn't pick up on, audio. It's a thing,
That's
technology.
totally okay. So we have a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about because our history together, you and me, spans back over 2 years, as you were one of the earliest interested parties in St. Pete by Night. But then we had a friendship for probably a good 4 to 6 months before that, where we were talking about D&D and everything like that. But let's kind of go back in time even further. When did you first kind of find out, or what was your first introduction to tabletop role-playing games, and what kind of appealed to you about it and got you hooked into the world of TTRPGs?
Yeah, so going back to probably 20 years, I learned about a store in the mall called Games Workshop because someone I was dating at the time took me there to go look at some painted models. So, I think Warhammer 40K was kind of my first introduction to that. I didn't have it growing up. No D&D, nothing of that jazz. And so one thing led to another. You're just painting figures, models, and really enjoyed reading the lore and what have you. Really got into Space Marines and Nurgle. Damon's really kind of spoke to my gross heart. And yeah, so that was the introduction. And then I didn't really play D&D. I had a lot of friends that were into board games, and so I kind of got familiar with sitting for 8 hours, 4 of those being setting up the games and explaining the rules and 4 or 5 hours playing it. Uh, and then after that, I want to say the husband's boss and coworkers wanted to play D&D. This is before the panorama. So we would play for like 9 hours. We'd get there at like 5 and we'd go home at like 2, 3 a.m. And it was good. and then it ended, as all campaigns do. And then the pandemic happened, and I didn't know that people played online, but I started getting invited to a bunch of games. People are like, let's do this online. I'm like, I didn't know this is a thing. And that's when I started like really getting more into playing with other people and realizing that, if everyone's at home and everyone has all this stuff and some of it is already PDF or digital content, you can just play with people online because up until that point everyone pretty set, I think, more often than not playing with individuals in person.
Right, right. And
And so yeah.
you have that in common with a lot of folks who kind of discovered the hobby of tabletop role-playing games, of D&D, because of, as you put it, the panorama, which, completely side tangent, which you and I are known to do on a regular basis. Panorama Video was a video store in Michigan. So when you said the panorama, that stirred something in my brain. But that's also something we have in common, is that you, for at least several years, lived in Michigan as well. But you've also lived all over the country. So that's kind of an interesting thing I'd like to talk about in a little bit here. But so you discovered it with the pandemic, or right before the pandemic, and then really got into online gaming during
Mhm.
that time period, that kind of stuck in the house, stuck at home. What really appealed to you and called to you about tabletop role playing games in general? Like, what was it about it that really spoke to you and made you so interested?
I think it was equal parts snacks and socialization.
That's
Also,
fair. Yeah.
organization, it's just Friday night. If you're gonna, sit around and interact with people, you can have the game going on. And the D&D group that we had were they were silly little guys, and they'd have like their coworkers they didn't like as the ones that were getting captured and what have you. And I didn't know these individuals too much, but they they're interesting. Yeah, yeah. So
Well, you took to online gaming and like tabletop gaming
mhm,
like a fish to water, because I know when we met, which was probably 2021, like early
mhm,
2021, mid 2021, is when you really were like in the midst of having a massive calendar scheduled with
mhm,
like, I'm streaming it this day and I've got a one shot
mhm.
this day. And it just seemed like you were always super busy with
Mhm,
potential games or games that were in the works, and we're getting invited to play with people across the world and playing with people
mhm.
all over the country. Uh, how did that kind of all kick off for you? How did you find yourself getting invited to those games and to those tables?
It's kind of happenstance. So probably in 2018, 2019, I joined TikTok and I made a lot of therapy content, and I got to about the 5,000 follower mark. I wouldn't budge. I'd gain 100, I'd lose 100, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And so I think early on in 2019, I kind of created a little group. They used to have these things called pods where you could boost each other's content, and it would show like engagement, what have you. And all of the other people whose content was in this pod, they were getting to 15, 20,000 followers. I'm like, what the hell? Like, what is going on with my therapy content? What the heck? So then right about that time, 2020 happens, the world's going to heck in a handbasket, and I'm still sitting at 5K followers. And I'm like, what is this? I can't even get to 10K or 15K. Now these people that I was with, they're at like 50K, 75K. And I'm like, we're making the same content and putting, trying to figure it out. So I thought like maybe my account is borked.
Okay.
And I thought I'm gonna make this stupid account about this other thing that I've kind of done on the side, D&D content, TTRPG content. There's one creator that I had found that was not therapy content, and it involved a lot of ropes, but he did a lot of D&D stuff as well. And I was like, I'm just gonna make this silly name. And I kind of I was like, what is this stupid name? I was like, mimic for hire, right? Like, who would go out and hire a mimic for a campaign? Like, that's so silly. And so I created this account, and then I just, there's a trending song, and all of my video I had 1,000 followers in a day. And my videos like through that month had like 30,000 like views,
Yeah,
50,000
absolutely.
views, 60,000 views. And I'm like, and it was just me in a hood putting up puns to I think it was like DMX. It was just like the stupidest like videos. Like there's no skill, no makeup, no filters, just like, you know,
Well,
whatever. And hmm?
you're an extremely talented content creator because I've seen the like depth and detail and editing you put into your videos. And actually, I want to take a moment here to kind of push your TikTok, or at least one of your many
Mhm,
TikToks. You've got mimic.4.hire on TikTok, which
mhm,
was your primary account
mhm,
when we met. And that's where I saw a lot of your like D&D based content
mhm.
and everything like that. And I think that's basically how we connected, was via
Yeah.
lives after that. And
Mhm.
that actually spawned to you making a VTM specific TikTok handle, which was
Yep.
sire.4.hire, where you
Mhm,
posted all of your, Vampire the Masquerade
mhm,
specific themed content. So it's crazy how it works, because I've seen people put so much work into videos and
mhm.
get absolutely no kickback, no response, no trending. And then you can put something as simple as like a rant or an opinion, or like you said, just some puns to a DMX song, and it'll take you to a whole nother level. So what's kind of your secret behind the content you make? Because I know we've got a lot of
Mhm.
fellow content creators in the community as
Yeah.
well as those that watch. What's your secret to how you kind of make videos?
Hold on, let me answer that question. I'll to follow up the last one because I feel like it was a little bit tangential. To answer the last question on how I got invited to the games, people started inviting me. People were just like, "Oh, you like D&D? You were making this D&D content. Do you want to join my games?" I'm like, "Yeah, I will." But then I started seeing that there were a lot of people posting about games I had never heard of. And I started, like you were talking about VTM. You're like, yeah, D&D is whatever, but have you heard about VTM? And other people are like, this stuff is dark, but have you heard of Kids on Bike? And I'm like, no. And so I just say, like, if you ever have a spot, join, add me, And so that's kind of how I got into that. And so as far as content creating, one of the things that I learned on with my therapy account is that when I went to Vegas, I went with some therapy creators who have like near 1 million followers. They are well known. It was a really big to do when people saw them all on vacation, and there was me in the corner. Like, no one knows me. I've got like 5,000 things. And they gave me a lot of information on it. And I've shared some of those tips with other people. One of, really, it's just knowing your niche. What do people follow you for? And I know a couple of the things that people like me for is puns and jokes. And it got to the point where there's a couple other creators that are really, they have a ton of followers, but when people saw them posting pun jokes, they would send it to me and they're like, "They're stealing your content." I'm like, "Puns aren't owned by anyone." Like, TikTok is the Wild West. It's who knows what they're gonna pick up, if they got 50,000 followers from the same joke that I made, I don't, it's no competition. But I
Right.
think,
Yeah.
in terms of making content, knowing how TikTok works and knowing that TikTok changes and you have to change your idea or understanding of how it works and how you need to post because they're always updating it. And so if you constantly do what you've always done, maybe it'll work, but likely you'll need to update it. And like one of the things that I'll do is that I used to film like 12 hours in a day and I would post 3 videos a day. Sometimes I'd get 200 views. Sometimes I'd get 2,000. Sometimes I'd get 20,000. It was like, a gamble. And I'm like, why am I giving up? Like, I'm going blind from this ring light. My eyes have had makeup. I've up touched. Like, I'm like, this is so much work. I don't have time for that. So, really, one of the things I learned when I went with those TikTok therapists is like, do what works for you. Like, if you don't look like that every day, make content like how you look. Because the
Right.
less you have to do to create content, the more effort you can put into who you are because people want things that are authentic, right? And not maybe you are done up and maybe you are in cosplay 100% of the time. But for the rest of us, just it's easy, like Crafty made that hat. Like I have the hat right there. I usually have Isaac on my desk. So there's no effort for me to put a hat on my cat and myself and do a reaction video.
Yeah, it's a lot more
2050 though.
relatable in that way, as if it's
Yeah.
just like you as an average
Yes.
everyday person. I
Hmm.
feel like that's
Right.
accessible to people. So I would
Yeah.
I relate totally, because a lot of my best videos were me like dog sitting. and just ranting about, a particular class in
Mhm.
D&D or something like that, whereas I would do these full cosplay
Mhm.
videos that took effort and time and editing and all this other stuff, and they do nothing. Like they would
Mhm.
hit nowhere. Whereas just the more relatable videos did seem to kind of connect with an audience a lot better.
Mhm.
And to what you said about like switching up content, I agree too. I think having variety is important unless you're lucky enough to like really hit it big right away with that thing that you're good at.
Mhm.
You gotta have to have something to draw in as many people as possible by keeping it fresh and varied and kind of a differing stream so that you can get a varied audience as well. Because especially in like D&D TikTok or like cosplay talk or anything like that, it's kind of a niche audience. Like these are
Mhm.
niche kind of groups that you're calling to, so you are going to hit a ceiling at some point. You are going
Mhm.
to hit a cap. Whereas with
Mhm.
varied content, you can get a varied audience and pull people
Mhm.
in from different kind of subcultures and sects and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think when going into Sire for Hire, the reason that I did that was because TikTok just did not want me to create that content. It would not give me more than maybe 100 views on it. It wouldn't push it. When I was looking at my metrics, it was only being viewed by people who looked at my profile. And so then I moved it over to Sire for Hire, and then it started getting views.
Right.
So one of the things too is that like if you create content and it doesn't do well, it's going to assume that your other content isn't good either, and it'll tank the other stuff. And I already knew that like D&D content and TTRPG content did well. However, it didn't like VTM content. And,
Right.
part of it is that when TikTok or the powers that be, the tech people can explain it better than I can, but if or when there's a hashtag that's consistently flagged, all of the videos with that hashtag will now be under a little more scrutiny. So, unfortunately, vampires are connected to blood, and unfortunately, blood is usually, you know, censored for good reason. But, when the majority of us are doing cosplay, it ends up either putting it in review or tanking it or what have you. And so it's like, uh, don't like
Well, a
it
lot
can
of people
be
don't know
difficult.
too that the hashtag VTM, just VTM, is actually a crossover to like a game show or a TV show in the Philippines as well. So there's kind of a weird kind of crossover audience there. Plus, like you said, vampires, blood,
Mhm.
violence, that kind of stuff. But also, Worlds of Darkness is a subsect of a subsect. Like
Mhm.
it takes the TTRPG community and cuts that down to like 2% or 3% of
Mhm.
the TTRPG community. So it is a
Mhm.
really much smaller group. And all those issues you mentioned of possible, flagging because of problematic hashtags and whatnot can definitely be an issue. So you created the Sire for Hire account to pretty much solely focus on that content and to kind
Mhm.
of keep it away from your other accounts so that you could kind of do both, but
Mhm.
have a place for each thing as well.
Mhm.
So, before we get talking on the next subject, I want to talk about the giveaway that we have tonight because we have such amazing sponsors that make this game possible. We have a giveaway tonight from our friends over at Dragon Ink Dice, who are giving away a free dice set. It's actually that one you see on the screen on the far right there. A beautiful set of VTM dice with the logos and everything imprinted in it, as well as a nice little business card, and it is sealed up and everything. So you will be the first one to handle these dice other than the creator. I did not, despite the temptation, break the seal. So as you can see here, I have them in my hand and they will be shipped out to you immediately. All you have to do is participate in the chat by using hashtag DiceMePLZ. That's hashtag DiceMePLZ, all one word, and we'll do that drawing at the end of our stream here. We'll announce the winner. I'll get in contact with them and get the dice sent out as soon as possible after the stream is over. But yeah, to enter into that contest from Dragon Ink Dice, all you have to do is use the hashtag DiceMePlease, and I'll remind you again near the end. But go ahead, and I can already see the chat's filling up with them now. But they're a great set of dice. Like I said, they've got the VTM logos on it. and it's just a beautiful coloring, and we're really grateful to Dragon Ink Dice for making that happen for us. So, speaking of VTM, it's a rather new game for you, but in the past 2 years, actually, really, it only took about 6 months for you to almost bypass the role of player or plow through the role of player into the role of storyteller. How were you introduced to VTM in the World of Darkness? You're muted again, dear.
So, okay. Yeah, so uh I I've been playing for 20 years and I play tested it. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, totally.
No, I
Shut up. Don't make fun of me.
yeah, so found out about it on TikTok. We used to do lives back in the day before there was really a server, and so really didn't understand it. Really wanted to play werewolf. The extent of my vampire lore that I knew was that I had a friend who was a huge Anne Rice fan growing up, and I liked the Underworld movie, and that was about the limit of what I knew about vampires. And so, yeah, so Kent was on one of my lives one time. I saw that his name was Michigan. I was like, oh, like Michigan. I lived in Michigan. And he's like, yes, I did live in Michigan. And then we just started talking. We started like going live together. And interesting. Yeah, it's so funny because when you created the server, uh, I was looking today, they have the new way of showing the roles. And so when you made the Discord, I'm like, oh, I know Discord, I understand it, yada, yada, yada. You created the server and I joined within 45 minutes of you sending, like creating it and setting it up.
I
And
remember
so
where I was when I created it and how quickly you joined afterwards.
it's like, I am here. There's some people who are like, oh, it's so cringy, or, you shouldn't auto reply when someone texts you. And I am not that person. I'm like, you send it, there's gonna be a typing bubble. I'm on it. I'm Tron. I'm in the internet for life. But yeah, so got onto the server, learned about it. It was a lot of chaos to begin with because we had like almost 200 people trying to figure out if they wanted to play, if they could play. There's probably more people who had never played than had, so a lot of us were learning, and so you had really set me up to be in Malkavian, and then it was really chaos, and then, like, the chaos of Malkavian on top of the server being set up, I'm like, "I can't handle both," and so you had elected to or, like, I had given you 3, clans, and I'm like, "These are what speak to me," and you're like, "You can't play these 2, you can go over here." And so I got put into La Sombra because I'm like, okay, these 2 people know what's going on. I'll just go under their wing and then I'll just kind of figure out stuff on the other side. And so, through that, we were really trying to like push people through. And I remember you were approving everyone. And then I was sending people like messages like, do or do not, you will be booted. Like, like just messages because we for those that are in the chat that understand VTM who were on our server originally, the entire server was divided by clan. And if you're in a coterie, the way games work, you wouldn't just like be with all of the Sombra. If you
Right.
happen to know them, that's great. But so it was kind of like an atypical setup, and it allowed those early players to really get connected. But it also helped me kind of get integrated into the server because I didn't have the chaos of 15 Toreadors or 10 Tremere or 10 Bruja or whatever it was, because we originally had 20 plus people for each clan, and by the time approval came around, it went to 10 or less.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple more than that. I think, Gangrel and Toreador were always pretty popular, but on top of that, La Sombra had 3. And so that made it really easy for me to be like, okay, what are we doing? And they're just like, are you Sabat? And I'm like, I don't know.
Well, we were very careful about kind of hand picking La Sombra. We wanted them to be a small group to begin with,
Hmm.
because they were kind of newly introduced to the Camarilla in the lore. We
Hmm.
really didn't want the more dirtier Sabbat element of players to kind of fill up that clan and try to take over the city. So we
Hmm.
had to be very, very careful about who we picked. And we wanted to have some new people, obviously, like yourself, who was very insistent on playing Alessandra, but
Hmm.
also to kind of just keep the group small. We were trying to set up a setting here that was primarily Toreador ruled, that had a pretty good gangrel presence, a lot of D&D players and werewolf fans went to Gangrel almost immediately. But we were trying to balance out the setting so that it
Mhm.
wasn't too bloated in one clan or another that would have offset the entire setting we'd created. But yeah, La Sombra, it did take a little while to, kick up steam, and now I think that people are educated and they know more about the game. Uh, La Sombra is definitely becoming one of the more popular clans
Mhm.
in the new iteration of the game.
Oh
So,
yeah. Yeah.
what about my sales pitch and about the setting and the game and everything really called to you? Like, what made you want to try Vampire the Masquerade? Because you were really, really into D&D when we were kind of starting talking. You were just constantly busy playing D&D games, and if I remember correctly, Warlock was your class
Mhm.
of choice. So what made you decide to kind of try a new system that is completely different than anything you'd ever tried before?
I think it goes back to my Warhammer roots. 40K, just liking like something dirtier, grittier, and the ability to have more role play. Like I said, the one D&D campaign that I had in person to begin with, it was more RP. We were shooting the shit. We were like doing silly stuff. Like yeah, we rolled dice. And one of the things that I liked about World of Darkness and Vampire is that one, there's a theater of the mind aspect of it where you could role play that. And former theater kid, I can imagine things and I can describe things, and I've you know published things, so like I can come up with a setting, I can come up with a description, and get into character. So for me, I liked that aspect, and I also liked that I it was all brand new to me, and to me it was like a brand new game, which I liked because unlike D&D 5e, I came in years after.
Right.
And so I appreciated that I was learning with everyone else, and I wasn't coming into, a bunch of um, revisions or additions. Like I was able to grow with Vampire because I knew based on the past history or from what I was like gaining that there's going to be additional supplemental information. But I find it less overwhelming to come into a game that's new, that you get it after the fact, than trying to come in and learn all of it at once. And so there was an element of that storytelling wise, because when people would try to create characters, they're like, and I'm going to put this, and I'm like, where's that from? They're like, what do you mean you don't know about blood points? And I'm like, "'Cause I don't. Like, where is that?" And they're like, "It's a thing." And I'm like, "No, I don't." And so there was like
Right.
that element, but I liked that that was primarily like, something new to me and new to others as well. So we were all learning together. And I
Well, and
like
it
that.
was it was a very it was kind of a new system at the time too,
Mhm.
because fifth
Yep.
edition really came out in 2019, and when we picked
Mhm.
it up, it had just kind of been going through the process of changing hands and writers, changing hands to Renegade. It was kind of experiencing this small resurgence, but it was still very early on in fifth edition that you
Mhm.
could kind of latch on, and everybody was on a somewhat even playing field. Obviously, there were those who had played the older iterations who knew the lore, but system wise, this was a fairly new system, I think, to pretty much everyone who joined the game, regardless of their previous experience with
Mhm.
World of Darkness or with Vampire. Everyone was going to have to be kind of starting from ground zero, learning the system. And so I think that took away some of the intimidation factor at the very least from people joining the game. Is like, no, we're all new at this. So everybody's expected to
Mhm.
make mistakes. We're not here to say, like, you have to know it as written like right away. We're going to all teach it, we're all going to learn it together, and we're all going to make mistakes along the way. So
Mhm.
on After Dark, we always accept questions from the chat, and I've already seen a few come in. We've had some experienced After
Mhm.
Dark watchers already submitting questions, but for those who are joining us for the first time, probably because of our amazing guest here, Rebecca, uh, the first question comes from Jay Hugo Boss, who wants to say, "What's your favorite Warhammer faction?"
Oh, I put it in there. So Space Marines has Nurgle, and I wish I would have sent you a photo of it. But so they have Space Marines, which are just like they look like these big armored guys. But the Nurgles are rotted, they're putrid, and they are amazing. And
And
so,
and then the next question comes from Tumultus, who asks, "What's Mimic's favorite tea?"
Mm, I love chai, any good chai, and there's a reason for that. And then second after that would be Earl Grey. But very like really random fact is that my mom was in the military and she used her somehow, I don't know how, she used her maternity leave when I was born to go to India.
Okay.
And so she just backpacked through the 80s, going out and doing stuff. And she came back with a bunch of recipes, and one of them was chai. So before there was Starbucks, my mom was like, putting in all these herbs and things into a pan and boiling it with like really strong black tea. And it was a treat. And so I grew up with like homemade chai through my childhood, and I really enjoy it. So, um, outside of that, Earl Grey is just a really good flavor. I know that a lot of people have recipes for infusing butters for certain baked goods, but you can do the same thing for tea leaves and infuse that flavor into whatever you're baking, which is really nice. And so Earl Grey, um, which gets its, I wouldn't say unique, it's like flavor or profile from the Vermont, which some people don't like. It's like a citrusy flavor, and some people don't like it. It's off-putting for them. But when you're able to infuse butter, uh, you can just make really nice, airy, like nice, like having like that, I don't know, light citrus flavor. It's just really good. So yeah, Earl Grey and chai, any chai.
So a lot of people may be asking where the connection between tea and St. Pete by Night comes in, but there is one, as our tea expert Rebecca knows. One of the biggest first projects that you kind of started, because you've
Mhm,
been one of the biggest contributors to the server. I consider you like my right hand person
mhm,
in regards to a lot of things like KindredCon. But one of your
mhm,
first kind of endeavors that you took on was creating a tea brand for St. Pete by Night through the Adagio Tea program, where
mhm.
we created flavors for each of the 13 clans in the kind of St. Pete world and cleverly named them, because you are also a master of puns, cleverly named them in separate fashion. So if you're a tea freak like our dear Rebecca is, you can actually find the St. Pete brand of teas at tinyurl.com/frenzy tea if you are a fan of the caffeinated blends, or tinyurl.com/torpor teas if you are more of a decaf individual. So we will make sure that those links are included in the description of this video. But Rebecca, tell me what inspired you to even try this, to do this. I know we've got a whole set of hunter brands coming out soon and probably a set of werewolf brands one
Mhm.
day coming out soon. But what was really the motivation behind setting this up?
It was twofold. One, we had a lot of stress in the early days, and there's like, the ability to just like enjoy some tea. But there was also the coffee crew in the morning, the breakfast crew, and people would just, they'd get on before work and they would putz around, and it was pretty fun. It was pretty nice. I found out about this idea from a podcast that I listened to. It's a Delta Green podcast, which is another TTRPG, amazing. And so they kind of, every season they kind of ask us like what's sticking out and what tea should we have, and they would do like one or two. And I love that. I love that they had these like different tea things, and it like brought the community together. And um some of the tea things would change, and it's kind of like, oh, this would be a great way for us. So really some of the names were created by other members, and it gave the community a way to kind of create a tea blend that represented their clan. And so I think there's like floral aspects to the Toreador tea, and then the La Sombra wanted Earl Grey. It's like a creamsicle, which is really cool. But I think it was not only a way to do community building with everyone, but also give things back to people because people can just enjoy tea. And on top of that, one of the other things is that I'm like a huge supporter of charity and like volunteering. So I spend, every year I'm volunteering somewhere, doing something, constantly have like emails like, can you come to this event? Can you do that? So one of the things is that I don't make money off of it,
None of us do.
but none of us make money off of the tea, but 100% of the tea that is purchased, a percentage of it goes to charity. And so the Gangrel tea goes to the SPCA because I thought that was logical. And then everything else goes to Child's Play, which is a uh, organization that I love. And they supply games to children who are going through cancer treatment. And they also do a lot of, they're more of a philanthropy centered nonprofit where they are into research and promoting that. So I thought, this is really cool. It might be 10 cents here and there, but it's cool,
Yeah, every little bit
because
counts.
every little bit counts. And so I thought, people can enjoy tea. It doesn't cost anything to donate. And the cause, for gamers, I think it's pretty cool that it goes to that. And I think that every year that I volunteered with them, they're just creating more unique ways of helping children and showing how the brain can be impacted for the better with the inclusion of gaming, where a lot of people might be down on it or otherwise say like, oh, kids are addicted, or and that's not true. But there's one of the, I think 2 years ago, they had this presentation on how they were able to create or they had this idea that or this information that when you're coming or going into surgery, your recovery is going to be dependent on how quickly you can bounce back from your anesthesiologist and the pain meds, etc. And so what they learned was that their mental health had an impact on that and their fear level. And these kids, there's a part of surgery where parents can't go beyond a certain point, and there's a point when they're like getting done with surgery or their procedure before a parent can come back. And so what they did, this nonprofit, they created this game that was kind of like Sims a little bit. And so they got this little thing, this tablet, so they could link up the 4 or 5 family members and the kid's face would be on there and they could just play along. And they could just like tap and like whatever. And so because they're able to carry that into into the like the surgery area, and they were there soon, just having that stopgap of how long it took for parents to be there, it improved the kids' recovery and reduced the time that it took for them to recover. And so, this is like, so it's just tea, but it's more than that.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like
it's
every
got
little bit counts.
yeah, it's got roots in
Hmm.
helping kind of a very, very important cause. I was
Hmm.
really glad to kind of have you spearheading this project too, because I know nothing about tea. So when you were like, "What kind of flavors should we put in?" I would come up with concoctions, and you'd be like, "I don't know about that." And I was really glad that you did, because I'm pretty sure these would have been some horrific blends had I tried to come up with them on my own. But it was really, really good to kind of have your insight in that. And that actually ended up leading to the blood drive kind of donations that
Hmm.
we also do, where we
Yeah.
award XP for people who
Hmm.
donate blood on a regular basis. And I think that we've had easily 300 or 400 donations just within the last 2 years on behalf of
Hmm.
players or members of the community of St. Pete who have, been inspired to donate because of our awarding of extra XP. So it's just you've always had a mind for giving back, doing good,
Hmm.
donating, to communities
Hmm.
and really helping out in any way we can. And I'm so grateful to have you kind of on the forefront of that stuff, because while being focused on everything else, it's nice to know somebody is looking for ways to benefit the community and to help, our community help out, but also make it look good, to be completely honest. And so I'm really grateful for that. So taking it back to St. Pete and the community, what was your kind of experience as a player? Because you were a player for about, I want to say, 4 or 5 months before joining
Hmm.
as a storyteller. What was that kind of experience like as you were playing not only a new system, but a very non traditional way of playing this system?
Hmm.
And it was kind of your first real big LARP experience, I would believe, too, as
Hmm.
it was kind of an online LARP. So what was that like for you? Walk me through like what the experience felt like during that time and what it inspired you to take the next step of becoming a storyteller.
It was chaos and pandemonium. it was an interesting experience because I knew that there was a Sabbat and I knew there's a Camarilla and there was Anarchs, and at that time we were 100% a Camarilla game. So not only was it the chaos of kind of trying to mod stuff on the side but also trying to play, um being a smaller clan that was fighting to have their independence in the city, or not their independence but their acceptance. And I think that playstyle wise, Lasombra was fine. Not having to know all of the lore of the Camarilla, Lasombra was kind of step up in that direction, you know? Not knowing everything through and through about the Camarilla as the Lasombra was overlooked, I think more so than for some of the other clans like Ventrue or Toreador, where they might have had this status or this connection lineage to the prince that there was this expectation. So I was shielded there. And so there were aspects that made it much easier because there was just the three of us. We weren't the clan that was getting staked every other day or like, trying to blow up, Elysium or something like that. We had a really tight knit group because one of the things that we had the advantage of the starting players is that when I said that we had 20 or so people in Toreador, Ventrue, or Bruja, we were all interconnected. So you had broodmates, you had sires, you had childer, you had people blood bonded, you had people who were from the same city. These three people might not have been connected, but we were connected.
Right.
And so it really made interesting things because it wasn't just like La Sombra. Things came out that, oh, there's this person in position of power in La Sombra who was doing some backdoor deals with people in positions of power in Ventrue, which you wouldn't necessarily know. But we had that upper hand. And so what was interesting is that it was kind of chaotic because I feel like the kid gloves, like you're saying, had to come off because it's not D&D.
Right.
And I didn't have a D&D mentality, but I think the backstabbingness of it like caught me off guard because in D&D it's kind of like you don't have chronicles, you don't split the party. You
Right.
don't do things by yourself. Like if you do things by yourself,
There's a
you're gonna
lot
die.
bigger of an element of
Yeah.
teamwork in D&D and a
Mhm.
lot of other role-playing games, which VTM
Mhm.
does have in a more traditional game to a certain point, but there is still a lot of political kind of
Mhm.
subterfuge and a lot of potential
Mhm.
for backstabbing and looking out for the advantage for
Mhm.
yourself. It's a much more selfish game and selfish motivated game than more of the traditional TTRPGs are.
Yeah. So that was one of the things that I had to learn because it was interesting because all of these people were like, "Oh, we're connected and we're connected," but they were doing backdoor deals and I'm like, "Didn't we talk about this?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's what we talked about." And I'm like, "Then why did you do that?" They're like, and I'm like, what is going on here?" And they're like, "VTM, maybe." I was like, "What?" And so I think that that was like, because I'm not a subterfuge player.
Right.
I can be smart, I can be clever, I can bring on charisma, but I just wasn't anticipating that, especially knowing that, how closely connected the 3 Lasombra were, and so the night before the game started, they had asked me, "Are you Sabbat?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "This is Sabbat, this is Camarilla, and this is Anarch. Lasombra are normally Sabbat, but you have to tell us if you're Sabbat. We're not gonna tell anyone if you are, but just let us know." And I'm like, "What is a city?" And they're like, "Camarilla, it's a Camarilla city." And I'm like, "Okay, then I'm Camarilla." They're like, "Are you Camarilla?" I'm like, "Yes." And they're
If
like,
you're a cop,
"Okay."
you have to tell me.
Yeah, basically. And that was our conversation, but I was like deer in the headlights. I'm like, they're really serious about this. And come to find out, Imelda had this whole game, amazing role player. She was Sabat. Like she never got rid of her connections.
Right.
And so it was really interesting listening to that and watching it because like as I was playing, I was like, wait, when we talked about this and she's RPing this way, she's lying to them. And then I just started like shutting up and I was like, well, I'm just gonna mind my own business. I'm gonna get my couple sessions when I can. Try to buy blood bank. That was like my only like real goal in the beginning was to buy blood bank.
Which I have
That's
the
all I
t-shirt
wanted.
for, which you can get on our shop. Yeah, so what advice would you give to somebody now, knowing everything you know now? What advice would you give to someone who's starting out in the world of darkness for the first time, for a VTM or any of the splats? Like, what advice would you give them as a new player coming into a game like this, or really any game?
Oh, do a one shot first. Do a one shot. Um, I don't like I don't like comparing it to D&D, but I'll try to liken it like, if there's, you know, stereotypes for certain things, I'll say, don't put all your eggs in the apple. If you like playing, a meathead, barbarian and you really want to play a Brujah, play, this you don't have to be a meathead Brujah, you can be a philosopher, but maybe you can go a bruiser Ventrue because that also, the way 5e is Ventrue can take a punch and give it. So if you wanted that, do a one shot so you can get the mechanics. That way you don't, blow all of um your effort on your first character and say like, "Oh, now I get it." So like I've played multiple characters now, and I'm like, okay, the way I would play La Sombra now, very differently. And if you were to bring Sneak Peek by Night the way in the model that you had previously today, and I were enter it as a La Sombra, be over for y'all. Like seriously, but that's like just because I understand it, but I loved Thin Blood, and I don't like there. And I think I approached you. I think Thin Blood and Ravenous were the two that I wanted to play as well, and you're like, "Don't do it." And I don't think I would have had the understanding of Thin Blood by the time I got to it, like a year
Yeah, you
later.
wanted to play hard mode. Like, you were picking all of the things that I was like, ugh, I don't know, right
Mhm.
away. Like, with as little kind of knowledge of the lore and stuff as you had
Mhm.
at the time, I was like, man, you are really going in and making it as difficult for yourself as
Yeah.
possible. So the Speed Geek asks a very relevant question. How much
Mhm.
of the lore do you think someone needs to know before going into a game? I worry that I wouldn't know enough backstory and would screw up the RP.
Hmm. I don't think you need. Well, I guess that depends on your age and how much information, because it's something that we've gone into in our games that we've kind of learned through character creation is that learn as much as you've built your character to know. Because sometimes we have people who have built characters that are new and have no occult and no history or status. And they're like, I was there, you know, in Carthage.
So
Like,
I've
it's
yeah,
just like,
so I've said this a lot of times to kind of piggyback on that.
Mhm,
There's enough lore in VTM and World of Darkness that it could be a doctoral college class. Like, there's
mhm,
just tons and tons of lore. But I would
mhm,
say for somebody who's starting out, as somebody who's played this game for 25 years and whatnot, uh, read the core book, because the
mhm,
core book is actually a lot more lore heavy than it is mechanics heavy, but it's light enough that it kind of gives you a glaze over of
mhm,
everything you need to know. So if you were to join the game or if you were to
mhm,
start a game, having that basic foundational knowledge provided to you in the core rulebook
mhm,
would be enough to get you started. Now, I think
mhm.
I have found that most people who kind of dip their toes in the lore end up taking a head first dive in following after because it
Mhm,
is so interesting and is so intriguing. But I think that you want to start at least with some basic foundational knowledge. Knowing the difference between Camarilla, Anarchs, and Sabbat is a pretty
mhm,
strong thing to have. Knowing that, the way these different societies work and know that you can't be a vampire out amongst the people, knowing the
mhm,
traditions. That's all very basic lore stuff. So
mhm,
if you start with at least a knowledge of all of that, I think you'd
mhm,
be good, but starting out with zero knowledge, I would definitely not recommend because you can say one thing wrong and it'll completely doom your character. Making one
mhm,
wrong move, breaking the masquerade, it's end game for you. So joining a game, whether it's all new players, whether it's experienced players, whatever the case may be, having a at least a foundation of knowledge that you can grow from, because then you can go after the things that really interest you. You can go after your clan knowledge. You can go after Camarilla knowledge specifically, but just a foundational understanding is key, is very, very much key, because we had so many people who didn't do their homework, didn't do any research before coming into this game, and immediately found themselves on the wrong end of a stake, or on the, dooming their character to being considered suspicious from then on out, because they just didn't understand the politics and didn't understand the societal differences of the game. But yeah, I think that that's absolutely a reasonable thing to do. The core book seems a lot more intimidating than it is. You can kind of skip over big chunks. The mechanics it's a lot more mechanics light of a system than your D&D or anything like that. So you can kind of glaze over the mechanics, but the lore stuff I think is very, very important to have. I would recommend it highly. So what enticed you to want to take it even a step further? I mean, you were one of the earliest mods because you were such a supporting force in the creation of the game and the foundations of starting the game. What made you decide to want to take the role of storyteller? Because that is a huge leap, and especially in the iteration of the game we were playing, a lot of responsibility. What made you want to do that?
I learn by doing. I think that's part of it. And so the way that we originally had the server is that we had to book a session with you and it was only you.
Yep.
And then after the fact, we kind of had like the roll tracker and, you can roll with the mods and all of that. And so maybe if we would have instituted that earlier on, it would have been easier on you. But you live and
Probably.
learn.
I'm a control
So
freak too, notoriously, so didn't help, but
and I think that at that time you had started talking about bringing Edeon, and so you're like they have a lot of vampire lore, and I'm like, oh well, if you're bringing someone else on, let me go in too. Like if you're going to be doing that, training one, train two, and also like if I could go to you, I could go to them. And she was super helpful as well, really experienced in the vampire, like getting a PhD in like vampire lore or whatever. And so they were, trying to like help out where they could. Um, but they also had a really limited schedule. And so I was trying to learn from both, and I think that that was kind of what prompted it was one, seeing like, okay, I've been here since October. We started in January. Now it's April. We've gone February, March, April. I've got 90 days in. I'm kind of La Sombre'd out. I understand, like, okay, it's a Toreador city. We have a lot of roses. People are burning, food trucks down. Things are going on. Ships are sinking. Like, there's chaos everywhere. And so, in an attempt to both help, but also like learn, I wanted to do both. And so we kind of, you're really clear in saying like, okay, but if you do this, you have to retire Everly, who is the La Sombra character, which I was fine with. I'm like, that's fine. If it meant, going down to, and I think we had brought up La Sombra numbers to like 4 at that point.
hmm.
And I was like, even though we're at 4, if I leave, they'll be at 3. So they'll be fine. And I can still have Everly in the background if needed for like special events or something. But really, I think, I only had one goal and that was to get blood bank, and I kind of did. And after that, what happened? Yeah, I think it's just really wanting to learn it because I had already learned how to DM in D&D and I had played VTM, and I also knew Delta Green as a game intimately for years, and I knew Hunter was coming out. So I knew that if I could kind of learn the mechanics of VTM, I could work my way to Hunter because I already had an established understanding of how Delta Green worked and Call of Cthulhu. And while the system's different with like sanity and all of that, I thought, you're hunting things that go bump in the night. And so that was really what kind of prompted it. Also, I still liked werewolf, and I'm like, well, I've never not liked werewolf more than vampire. I've just settled into playing vampire because that's all that's available. And
Right,
so
we
what
didn't
ended up
have a fifth
happening,
edition werewolf yet.
we didn't have, well, you didn't even have fifth edition hunter yet.
No, not right away.
No. So I was like, well, if I learn this and I can get in, then I can merge over. So then, fortunately, we brought on more people. So we were able to just keep, traveling in the trajectory where we're in. But yeah, that's part of
So
what
we
prompted
have
it.
an amazing question from Jay, but before we get to that, I want to remind everyone Again, of this amazing giveaway that we have going on tonight. You can get your very own set of VTM dice brought to you by Dragon Ink Dice. It's the set that you see on the far right of the screen there. It's beautiful. The colors are incredible. It's got the VTM symbols on it. Those can be yours by entering into our dice giveaway by just putting hashtag DiceMePLZ in the chat. That's all one word, DiceMePLZ can enter you in for this free set of dice that you will get right away for yourself, that we will ship out to you immediately after, or as soon as possible after the broadcast, and we'll announce the winner of that before the end of the stream tonight. So Hugo Boss with another amazing question. Jay asks, hey Mimic, what is the hardest part of helping to run St. Pete by Night? And if you could change or do one thing in the server, what would it be?
Oh, probably not managing it. I like either like sleeping or not on vacation, just logging in like I will not be on today and then still being on, just like not saying I'm a control freak like Kent said it, but also, just like wanting to check in and see like what are people doing? What is going on? Where are things happening? And everything's pretty, self self-managing.
It's gotten a lot better since the revamp, that's for sure. Things have
Yeah,
kind of
100%.
found their lane and
Yes.
found their groove, and now I think we've got it to a manageable level. But in the
Mhm.
early days, it was absolute chaos. Like it was just constantly demanding our attention. I would wake up to hundreds of notifications literally every single day. And while I like seeing some of that come back and seeing more server activity happening, I definitely don't miss those days when I was dreaming in Discord, literally. Like I would
Mhm.
dream that I was in Discord calls, and like managing the server. So what is one thing that you would want to add, bring to the server or change about managing St. Pete by Night?
Oh, I've had a lot of bad ideas. Let me think of a good one. Hold on. Another thing. I think one of the things, well, I think that After Dark is kind of that way, but I think I would love to see more ways of incorporating or hearing from the tables that aren't being streamed. Because one of the things that was so awesome prior to revamp is everyone was in everyone's business for better or worse.
Right.
And so one of the things that not everyone can see is that when they become mods, they're like, ah, it's like wall of text and wall of channels. They're like, holy shit, there's so much going on behind the scenes here. Oh my gosh. And so like when I view the server, I can see that there's like 15, 20 people in a voice call. But the thing is that players who are at tables can only see their table. I
Right.
can see that, Bara, Crafty, Tyler, you, whoever has people. So people are active, which is really cool. I think there's something to be said that when you can see people are like gathering in a place, like it attracts other people because they're like, oh, they're here. I want to be here. But before everyone can see everyone else's RP, now no one can.
Right.
Unless you're like the onesie or twosie that's in open RP, you don't see anything, and there's no good way of doing that, because it is so private and it is so secular with each table, but and, that's just the nature of how we have to structure the server now, but that if there was a way to show people how active it is,
Yeah, I
that
think
would
if it
be
wasn't
awesome.
so overwhelming to
Mhm.
players to see all of the different channels, because like you
Yeah.
said, the whiplash becoming a mod, and I think all of our mods or
Yep.
new storytellers have said this, is like it's very overwhelming. There are a lot
Mhm.
of moving pieces going on all at the same
Mhm.
time, and so for players, I don't want there to be a comparison of like, well, this storyteller ran a 3 hour session
Mhm.
and mine was only 2 hours, like that kind of.
Mhm.
I don't want it to build that kind of animosity in the server, and
Yeah.
I also just don't want it to be seem too much. Like people,
Right.
when they realize, like they get eased into things, just okay, now I see all the out of character channels. Okay, now I see the in character channels in my
Mhm.
table. Like it's a gradual process. But I have thought about it, and I haven't completely shut down the idea, if not just yet. Eventually opening it so that at least people can see those
Mhm.
tables, even if they can't interact with them.
Yeah,
But
I think
that's something to consider.
I think one of the other things that I'm looking forward to, and I know there's been kind of conversation about it, is because so many people were able to see what other people were doing, people were more connected, even if they weren't in those groups. And I look forward to, and I hope that this happens before we just anyone who had an idea as a player, we were on board with it. So if someone's like, "Can I?" Like one of our players was like, "Hey, can I play 2 movies every night in the month of October? We're
Yep.
just gonna have Halloween marathon October." We're like, "Yes, do it." Every night of that October, we had 1 to 2 Halloween movies, which was so cool. I did a trivia night.
Yep.
We had tons of awesome gifts, and so I'm kind of looking forward. I think that that's something like that us as mods and players can't necessarily do. It's just kind of like, if that's your thing, do it.
Yeah.
But
100%.
I look forward to that kind of like as people start getting established, as we're rolling out more of these open RP, open invite sessions. I think more people might feel more comfortable
Yeah.
doing it.
And for those looking to, find a way to get involved in the server to benefit the community, you can absolutely do that. Like if you want to host a watch along party for a movie that you've been meaning to see or a TV show, like I streamed Babylon 5 for like 15 straight hours the other day. You can do that. Like there's nothing we're not here to tell you what you can and can't do as long as it's appropriate, as long as it, considers everyone around. Like absolutely you can host your own out of character activities. Plus you can host your own in character activities. That's what OpenRP is for. And I think that the shutdown revamp kind of process that we went through really cooled people on the community, and a lot of people obviously left. We got a bunch of new people in, and
Mhm.
so it was kind of like a big transition there. But there are ways to get involved without needing storyteller or staff approval. There are ways you can
Mhm.
host trivia nights, you can do Jackbox nights. I think it's just a matter of being patient,
Mhm.
setting these things up and having them happen. And even if you only get one or two people the first time, you'll probably get three or four people the next time, and
Mhm.
5 to 10 the next time. And so it's just having that kind of confidence and that willingness to put yourself out there, even if it
Mhm.
feels like rejection, just realizing like people are still kind of making their way back, or they're finding their roles
Mhm.
within the server, and beginning to socialize. So that's what I would advise to all viewers and members of the community, is just take a chance, and maybe you won't see a payoff right away, but it will come. Like people want to
Mhm.
gather, they want to do things, but they're also, all neurospicy introverts, just like, we are. So
Yeah.
it's going to take some warming up, and it's going to take some time. But we are constantly thinking of ways to stimulate the server. We're constantly thinking of ways to, keep interest in things, and get things going. And as for interconnectivity between games, that's what OpenRP's for. Like that's why
Mhm.
we have it. That's why we allow it. That's why we put it out there. Is for OpenRP and for groups to have crossovers and that kind of stuff. Now, as to what you said about streaming, thankfully your idea, which has been, starting to build up steam, is summaries, or,
Mhm.
other ways of kind of making content from tables
Mhm.
accessible. So I know you're going to be doing summaries from your game, which we'll talk about your
Yep.
game in a minute here.
Yep.
But also, I know Crafty is going to have a voice only game, that's going to be a YouTube exclusive, where you won't see their
Mhm.
faces on screen, but you can sit and listen along to their story as it's happening. And we're just building up more and more kind of opportunities for people to see beyond the curtains, beyond the like closed channels or the channels that are invisible, so that people can have more accessibility to the game. But yeah, OpenRP, I mean, that's player driven, that's player initiated. So even if you end up having to sit in a channel for an hour, you never know who's going to hop in. You never know who you're going to cross paths with. It might even be an SPC from the storytellers, just to give you a little bit of fluff and a little bit of fun and engagement. Some of the best stories in all the iterations came from OpenRP.
Mhm.
That's the things that I feel like people remembered more than the streamed sessions or the story based, storyteller sessions, was the OpenRP encounters. So just taking the opportunity and taking the leap really does you a lot of good, and I encourage everybody to do so. So now let's talk about your game, which is
Mhm.
Good Girls Blood,
Mhm.
which we are going to eventually start seeing as YouTube exclusives as well, coming from the
Mhm.
players, kind of recounting their experiences rather than the
Mhm.
actual stream sessions.
Mhm.
Tell us what you can without giving away too many spoilers or secrets. What's up with your game? What's the deal?
So I will backtrack this and say that when we started the revamp, we kind of had a back and forth about what generation, what age players could be. And previously, before the revamp, we were really strict on Insulae. We
Hmm.
didn't. I mean, we already have a lot of vampires. You're not going to have a ton of older vampires in one city, and also not always, but frequently we'd get people who only wanted it for the XP boost, for the power game. And so we had to kind of like balance all of that together. And so when we did the revamp, we were kind of like, if you have experience and you're not going to, FAFO with all of that extra stuff, you can. And so my table has 5 people who all have 20 plus years in the world of darkness. They all have storyteller experience, like beyond me. And so when we were kind of chatting about what they wanted, they don't want to fight. They want to talk their way through it. And they want to do politics. They want to do kind politics. They want to do kindred politics. They are going to be in the business. And so they really looked at how and what people would do or say um together if they were that old and together. If you happen to have 5 together, what would they do or say? And so one of my players had said, "Well, I wanna be a neonate. The character concept that I have isn't old." And I said, "Well, do you wanna kind of go instantly and I'll just give you the 15 XP to start, and then you can, like, spend the other 25 XP later, that way you're not, like, at such a deficit?" They're like, "No, I wanna be a neonate through and through." They're like, "I just wanna be a
A
study
neonate in a
buddy."
room of elders.
Yeah, yeah, they're like, "I'm gonna be," and, it works, they're in Nosferatu, and they are kind of like the study buddy, they sell illegal test results, test answer keys, but also, they're an assistant, a lab assistant or something, study, faculty assistant. So all of them are connected to St. Pete University, University of Florida, and so they all kind of created a character that is in the university, either as faculty or furthering their education. I have one that's a forever student who's got like 10 degrees. He just keeps enrolling. And then I have one that is in law enforcement who is faculty there, adjunct faculty. Nosferatu. I do have a Banu who is a lawyer, and um, they have just kind of been working together uh, to figure some things out. And so one of the things that I did to begin with was I kind of gave them like a B plot to kind of work together. Because one of the things is that I knew every person who came to my table in real life to some capacity, with the exception of 2. So 3 of the 5 I kind of knew. 2 of the 5? I think 2 of the 5 actually. I knew 2 of them. The 3rd one was the friend of one. One was a new player to our server, and I'm not remembering the 5th off the top of my head. But anyways, we were all connected somehow, but not all of us were connected with one another. So one of the things is building up chemistry with the table. And so trying to do that with people who are all storytellers is interesting because they're players. They're all players, and trying to like, they're all so polite and nice to one another, and so I gave them a B plot of adventure gone wrong, and tried so that they could kind of figure out, this is what would happen if you needed to be physical in the situation, this is what you would need for, social stuff, and this is like investigation. So I give them a few sessions like that, and there were equal parts red herrings in that, and then equal part hooks that went directly to their character sheets. Some have been found out, some have not. And I did tell them, I said, I'm going to be using Blood Bank in the Tampa Bay Times. So one of my favorite things, and they keep track of it, but they're not sure. Some of them have picked up, like, there might be a touchstone or two that's mentioned in a Tampa Bay Times article, maybe. We do that as storytellers. Um, and I think it's really interesting because where stories are concerned, usually people keep their touchstones private or don't
Yep.
tell people. And so you have this group of mostly older vampires who are like seeing things kind of like on fire in the distance. And they're just like, Mimic, what are you doing with this? Or how dare you? Like, why would you do that? What is going on? I'm like, "Are you gonna talk to the group about it?" They're like, "What do I say? I don't say anything." I was like, "Well, you can." They're like, "I can't." And I'm like, "Okay." And they're just like, "What do I do with this?" And I'm like, "I don't know. You wanna roll something? What do you wanna do?" So, it's fun, it's really fun. I will say that I am a huge fan of the Cult of the Blood Gods, and so I've
Love your
incorporated that.
blood cults. My God.
I do. It's just such a good book. I love the book through and through. I've put it in every one shot, spoiler alert. And maybe it's in this too, but they haven't figured it out yet, or maybe it's not in there. I don't know. They are getting cult vibes, but yeah.
So Jay asks, did you have any concerns or difficulties for running for such experienced players?
Mm, no, I think I do a rose, thorn, and blood every or rose, bud, and thorn every session. I'm a huge proponent of like feedback, getting feedback, incorporating feedback. Um, and that's primarily because I have been in some games where Kent's like, why are you playing with these knuckleheads? And like and then I realize in hindsight, they don't have safety tools. And then when I'm like, on the outside, I've storytelled, I've DM'd, I've done these things, and then I'm trying to incorporate it. They're looking at it as like a threat. And I'm like, I don't want to be that person who's not honoring or respecting my players' wishes to have a better game. And so I think like the concern I had is, not I wouldn't say meeting their expectations, but not hearing them if or when they had something wrong. Because I know others have got to a point where they're like, I stayed in this table too long,
Right.
and I think that that's like one of the things. And so really, I think that like that's a concern is like I don't want them to feel like, okay, well, we're not getting anything done, But also, I don't think there's any difficulty in having them in the table. They're really good. Like there's one session where they're like, there's too many pregnant pauses. Uh Someone needs to be the leader. And then after everyone had that feedback, which was great feedback, where it's kind of like that pause where it's not bad, but everyone's kind of like hemming and hawing, like, what should we do next? And just having like these ruminating things. And then the next session, everyone crawling all over each other because they had this wild situation going on. And they're like, well, I want to do this, I want to do that. And so I think that like finding that groove was going to happen, but also, it was like a B storyline, so I kinda got that out of the way.
So, of the other tables there that are currently running, the other groups that we have currently, is there a group that you would really love the opportunity to work with?
Um, I don't know. Um, I think it would be interesting if they got to chit chat with the werewolves
So,
because I
a crossover between the vampires and the werewolves?
because they're instilling, they would be the ones who know not to fuck with them, like, like, they would be the ones that would be cautious, like, I wouldn't take, like, a fledgling anarch group out there, they'd be like, they'd be killed,
That's fair. That's fair.
and so I think, like and I know your players, like, I know, like, the 5 of them, 4 of them beating the 5 of my players, that could be not because werewolf versus vampires, like, a smart idea, but knowing those players versus mine, and having, like, that slow burn of like, "What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?" It's just like that tension that could possibly be there.
right.
Um, but in terms of that, so the thing is that they are Camarilla through and through.
Right.
With the exception of my one Tremere, who is like House Karna.
Okay.
And so he's kind of like ambivalent. So I think like that could be interesting. I think them meeting anarchs would be interesting. Any of them for the sake that they they have some they have s they are Camarilla through and through, but they have some wild ideas. Like they had some choices some choice thoughts about the regent and management of the pyramid without knowing that Lakar was there playing the Tremere Primogen. And so he was kind enough to say, like, you probably should reconsider how you speak about this clan when you don't know who's in the room with you, especially if you ever have intentions of meeting the regent, because he will put you in an ashtray. And so they're like, oh shit. And then after the fact, they're like, so we didn't know who they were. And that was like an interesting feedback on that session because they're like, we didn't know it was the Herald and the Primogen who was there because I just dropped the SPCs on them.
Yeah.
Because in Kindred Society, if two people walk in, you don't know who they are.
No, not without any reason. And also, there's the benefit of, hey, this information is available on the server. This is why I encourage people to
Mhm.
like explore the channels like the World of
Yeah.
Darkness, section where we have the important people of
Mhm.
St. Pete listed. So if you're
Yeah.
not doing your homework, you're doing yourself a disservice. Like we make a lot of the kind of setting info available to the players, and if they're not doing the research, then they get the consequences of that, and they're not always good consequences.
Yeah. And I think the other one that might be interesting to join is I think there's the medical coterie
Hmm.
slash one. So in our in all of our Haven area, all of our chassis, 5 dot chassis, we have a hospital.
Yep.
And I think that there's not necessarily a reason for them to reach out to them, but I could see like all of them connected with the hospital. I think they are, um, to some degree, right?
Oh, all of the characters, yeah, all the hospital coterie people are connected to their specific hospital, St. Anthony's in the north. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I think that that would be an interesting one because our coterie does have some connections to the hospital, but it's our hospital that's in
yep.
our domain. So I think that that could be interesting too.
No, absolutely. So I want to take another moment to remind people of our dice giveaway that we have going on right now, brought to us by Dragon Ink Dice. That beautiful set of dice you see on the far right could be yours. All you've got to do is enter the hashtag DiceMePlease PLZ in the chat, and these dice could be shipped out to you as early as this week. So go ahead and submit that hashtag into the chat to be entered into the running for those dice because they are gorgeous. They are wonderful. I have them in my hand right now in a sealed envelope that they provided with a business card so that you can order more dice from them in the future and support this game, support them, and support one of our wonderful sponsors. So, what has been your favorite experience so far? Whether it's a particular session, whether it's something that happened in the server or an event, whether it's KCON, what has been kind of your favorite part of this entire experience within the St. Pete by Night community?
I mean, watching it grow has been pretty good and seeing the continued growth post revamp. Um, I think that was a really good thing. Seeing the revamp was arguably one of the best things because it was like a battle zone. It was complete war zone, and it was, you know, we've said it before. We play monsters. We're not monsters, but we were there where it was just not. And so I think like seeing that revamp and having that downtime and seeing all the work behind the scene, but in a different kind of way because it was similar to when we started the server. Because you have to think we went from October to January, right? So you
Yep.
have this 4-month period. And then we had from like June to October,
Yeah.
you know? So just about the same amount of time, but now we knew everyone.
Yep.
Whereas before we didn't know anyone. I mean, one here, one there, maybe a husband and wife, but we had played together. And so having that 4 months where we're like, "Okay, these are all the things that don't work, and these are the things that do." And I think that that was one of, like, kind of the best things because we had the ability to get that break, kinda solidify it, see what people are good at, see where people wanted to go, and then we got so many new people that it
And
really
constantly growing still.
constantly growing, and it's like, I don't wanna put a percentage on it, but there was a high percentage of the people who came from TikTok when we first started.
Yep.
And as we've grown, and as people have kind of like got their friend here or put a business card out at their local game shop, in Indiana or shared it at this convention in Texas. And so we're starting to gather these people or these five people from this LARP met us, so they joined, and so we've had this ability to get an organic growth, and I think that that's really awesome, and it wouldn't have been possible because one of the things people don't know is that prior to the revamp, what I would do is I wasn't lurking. I would go into like the world of darkness and like renegade thing. And if people would post that they wanted it, I would kind of send them like an information. I'm like, this is everything you need to join. And I would kind of do it based on like what clans were low. So I would post like need three gangrels and like people would message me and then three gangrels would come in pretty much ready to play. I didn't know them, but it was kind of like recruiting people like based on what we needed.
Right. Right.
And so not having to do that anymore was great, but it also kind of allowed us to like have people who wanted to be there because they're like, oh, well, I got to play for a couple months, but it's whatever. And then they would come back. And
Yeah.
so yeah.
And we've gotten people from all walks of life now. Like, yes, it
Hmm.
did start primarily on TikTok because that's where I kind of was talking about it and hyping
Hmm.
it up for the most part. But then now it's expanded all over the place. I mean, we've got people all over the world. We've got Australia, New Zealand, Europe, France,
South
down in
America.
Brazil. Yeah, like we've got people all over the world from all walks of life who found out about this game through one way or another. And I'm most interested because I think a lot of people don't know anything about St. Petersburg, Florida. Didn't even know it existed before this game. I sure didn't know it existed before I moved here. And now are kind of getting a slice of Americana, but also kind of discovering this community that I adore so much. So we had another question from Tumultus who asks, "What other tables that aren't streamed do you want to know more about or watch unfold?"
I mean, arguably all of them. That's like one of the things I miss is that back in the prior iteration, we had storyteller meetings every week, and I knew everything. Like we knew everything. We had an ongoing thing. So the storytellers, we had a text channel where we posted notes of everything we did.
Hmm.
So I could look at it daily, and I'm like, this is what Bear did. This is what Kent did. This is what Mimic did every single time. Now, I didn't read everyone's character notes, but I don't get to know that now
Yeah.
as much, so I don't, I get to hear, the 3 to 5 minute little recap and, so and so. So like really I want to hear everyone's table. I want to be in everyone's business. I want to listen to it and be able to be connected with that because we don't get that opportunity anymore. And it's not that I like one or another, but I love Anarch more than Camarilla. But also, like, I just want to be in people's business because there's so many like little intricacies and players that I know are together where I'm like, oh, I know they're awesome RPers together, or I know that these people are four friends that came in together. So I know they're gonna have that chemistry and that's what's worth watching. Or these people were here at the revamp and, they were here before the revamp and they're here now. I wanna see that. So I want to see everyone and hear everyone because I was able to before and I haven't been able to do that in the last couple months.
Well, and that's another thing that I think people have kind of either failed to realize or have not caught on to yet is that like there aren't the same rules about meta there used to be. Like we used to be
Mhm.
very staunch about meta only because we didn't want to ruin people's enjoyment in the server and there were so many players playing actively all the time and information going to one
Mhm.
group that wasn't going to another. But now with this new format, with the revamped format of
Mhm.
having separate tables, those rules are kind of free now.
Mhm.
Like you can go into general chat, out of character and talk about your sessions and talk about your games.
Hmm.
And I highly encourage people to do that. Like, I really do. I think that is also another way you can contribute to the community, is just like get in a chat and ask people, what was their favorite session so far, or tell them something interesting about their character. Obviously nothing in ways that they could take in game and use against them, but just for fun, just to get that sense of community and to kind of bring that connectedness and togetherness back. I mean, part of the reason why it's so, less information now is because we have given a little bit more control to the storytellers over
Hmm.
specific tables, and we have kind of divided things up now that unless, something's on fire, we don't really go into detail about each person's story, because also it would take hours and hours and hours that nobody has to do so. But yeah, I would definitely say, like, just being present, being active, being a part of the community. Like, you can find out this kind of stuff, you can get involved in this kind of stuff, and you can share your own triumphs and stuff. And this isn't me talking to you, more to the players that are watching. But it isn't hard to feel connected and to feel involved. The server may look dead at times, but it is anything but.
Hmm.
And so, just because there's another game going on right now that you can't see doesn't mean those players won't come and hang out with you after their game is over or before their game, because they see you around and active. So I definitely encourage people to give that a shot. So, what are you looking forward to in the future of St. Pete by Night, in this community, in the structure of the way we do things? Like, what are you most excited for?
Hmm. Mm, what am I most excited for? Um, seeing the vignettes, seeing people coming on. I like all the uh opportunities for um the streams to be on either the After Dark or on YouTube. I like that. I also think that seeing KinderCon grow would be nice. I think that would be really good. Also, I don't know. I think that's it. Really, seeing KinderCon grow to something bigger. Having some in-person connections. I know that we kind of had the ability to run some games at a LARP recently,
Right.
and there's 101 LARPs in the US that we can run games at. And I think that if it's not one org, we can go to another, or we can go to them all. If we become that person, we have a brand that's already established, and so where it comes to making connections, I can do that. I
Well,
can
and
I
you
can talk to
are
people.
you are one of the most, like, interconnected, embedded people in the gaming community because of your involvement in so many different cons, because you work with Modern Artifice, who has since become a player, but with them, with their dice
Mhm.
making and everything like that. What got you into that? What made you want to get so actively involved in the convention scene?
So we're going back like 15 years. I did Penny Arcade Expo. It's in Seattle, and it's expensive. Going to cons is expensive. And even if I live like next to it, I wanted to go, but then I I couldn't get tickets. I couldn't get badges in the before times. If you didn't get a badge, you didn't get to go. So, I think that that was something that I uh did just so that I could go. And I was like, if I have to work a few hours, um I'll go because I get to be with my friends. We get to party. And back then we partied. Like
Yeah.
back in the day before there was Reed Pop, it was wild. Like people who were working cons were just like they were they were partying. They were like, yeah, the Xbox is over there, you know, they were just partying, and then they like kind of tightened it up. And the people that had kind of got me into it, who I had partied with after the fact, kind of got banned or couldn't or didn't want to work because they're like, well, if I can't be at the convention getting paid to do this, and, party the way I was. I'm not doing it at all. So I got the thing to work it, and then they didn't work it. And so I started making new friends and then partying with the other people. And so I just have, these gay, these days where I was able to hang out and I was able to moderate Twitch and get paid. So one of the things that I don't know if people realize is that they call it volunteering because they don't want 101 people to do it, but they pay you. The conventions pay you to work it, either through an hourly rate or through compensation through your hotel room. And if you've looked at con prices for hotel rooms, that's like a $2,000. It can be up to 2 grand, depending on how big it is for how long the con is. And so being able to cut back on the cost of travel and the ability to get in, that 2 grand can be worth it to people. Um, and so that's kind of how I got in. And then kind of snowballed where because I was in for one, I was able to go to the next one and I got into it. And so I started that in like 2007, 2008, and I just kept doing it. And then I went to PAX South in Texas, and then I went to PAX East in Boston. I did Gen Con, helped run LARP there, did MCM in London,
Yep.
done Emerald City Comic Con and some Geek Girl Con. I got to work at that, and just like kind of picking up like little cons here and there. And then before the pandemic happened, so I was getting paid to moderate Twitch for PAX, and there's like 500 to 1,000 people in a room, and we're moderating four rooms. They decided to absolve that team, and my friend and I, who had been doing it for years across the country, were like, okay, this is a really sweet gig. We've been sitting backstage with like Markiplier and all these other well-known people who are going on stage for PAX. All of these years, we knew it was a good gig. It's run out. Um, then we were able to kind of walk into managing backstage because we already knew it. So managing backstage, there was only ever one. Now, when we managed our stream team, we had up to 4 people 3 times a day. The backstage has one person in charge backstage and then another kind of gopher. And so both of them kind of went away the year of the pandemic and they needed two new people. So they dissolved our team in 2019, didn't really do it in 2020. 2021 comes back and we were like, hey, can we manage backstage? Because one of the things that we had to kind of go over with people is not to fangirl over well-known people because you have these owners and these developers for AAA companies. You have these people who are doing the concerts and what have you. So, we're backstage with these people who have in the geek world a really well-known following, and so we had to be cool. We were in our seat doing a job, and so, occasionally we were like, "Oh, can I go get their autograph?" We're like, "No." They're like, "But they're just right there." We're like, "We don't care." We're
Yeah.
like, "If you get up out of your seat, you can just go home." And so, because we had that like working relationship and that professional level, they just were like, "Hell yeah." Because people knew that there was only 2 spots backstage and we were able to walk into it because they knew we had already been there for
Yeah.
years
You already
prior.
proved yourself.
Yeah, and so there are people who are like, "Oh, I've done theater and I've done this, and can I do it?" And they're like, "No, we've already got 2 people." They're like, was this position put out?" We're like, "No." And it was really interesting. I did that in 2021, 2022, and I didn't do it last year.
So
So I did it.
how can people go about getting involved in that kind of stuff? Like how did you find out about getting involved and how could others who want to get involved in the con circuit do so?
Yeah, so the majority of cons will say volunteer. It'll say volunteer, but they're not necessarily volunteer. They're going to pay you. Because they can't legally pay people to do things that they're also paying people to do, so more often than not, everyone gets paid or compensated. Some of the smaller cons will just comp you, they only expect you to work the amount of hours that are, equal to the cost of the badge, um, but
So you
more
could knock
often
that
than
all
not.
out the first day and then have the rest of the con just to be a
Sure can.
visitor.
Yep, sure can. And you can pick the hours. You get to pick the hours, you get to pick the department. There's a furry con that I'm going to be working here in London in a couple of months, and my dad wants to be a photographer. Like, there's a thing you can sign up to be a photographer. Like, if you have a skill set, You can also tons of people, so many people I know put their volunteer experience, it's paid volunteer, right? Experience on their resume.
Yep.
Because even though it's only 3 days, 2 or 3 times a year, they have people running the audio, for a stage. You can put that on your resume. They have people that are working HR and helping check people in and check people out. You can put that on your resume. The con in Seattle back in the day, they used to have an entire lounge where they had all the snacks and all of the like the little things like if you forgot them while you're traveling, you could get a little toothpaste or you could get a little, chapstick or condoms or whatever it was that you needed. And they had it. They had it like it was a whole thing and they had white noise machines and everything. Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit,
Mhm.
in the real world, outside of the digital realm, you are a therapist.
Yeah.
How has that benefited you in terms of playing TTRPGs, running games,
Mhm.
that kind of thing? Like, how do you think those skills or that kind of education has benefited you in running the games that you run and play in now?
So I think to my betterment, I have a better understanding of like human connection and stability or instability where that can come in because I can, I think I mentioned this on another stream where we were talking about playing a Toreador
Mm-hmm.
and how I didn't like it. I was like, I went real mean girl. I was like, let's talk about it. Like you're making people cry for a living and Toreador are coming in to be mean. I'm like, I've got you. Let's go. And so I think that where that variety is needed, I definitely have that. Um, However, to my detriment, I think I tolerate shit longer than I should. Because I'm like,
Yeah,
because
not getting
that's what I
paid for it for sure.
you know what I mean? Like, not like, I've said like I don't think it's, a me thing, but I think that I and other people sometimes get into tables where they're like, okay, maybe it was just this session. Or maybe they were just having a week. And then you tell someone else and you're like, why are you in that game? And I'm like, but it's fun. And it's like, but why? Like,
Is it though?
and I think that like part of that is that I hear stuff like that all week and I'm like, "Oh, wait, this is my fun time." Like, you're right. They shouldn't do that. That's right. I'm not getting paid. Just, I think that that's something that has prepared me for it to help tolerate that longer, sometimes longer than I should. Um, I think that where certain things that I do with my profession and or volunteering can kind of be used for some clans, like, with La Sombra having a Catholic upbringing. Am I into religion? Not so much, but I understand it
Yeah,
and
you
I
get
know
it.
it. So if I'm reading it, I get it. If I'm with people, I'm like, I can talk the talk, I can walk the walk, I can La Sombra, but I also own business in more than one state. So if I need to venture in real life, I've done more than one business, I've published books and I did all of the details behind the scene, you know, uh, business with therapy, having a business in Wyoming and Washington, setting that up, knowing how taxes works when you have multiple businesses, things like that. Like that's a bit more of a venture thing than anything else. So, that helps there. Um, and I think that all of those little things kind of add up to help or to pull from what I've done either in the most recent past or over time.
Right.
And that can kind of help.
One of the biggest conversations kind of in the gaming community, and I think you're the perfect
Mhm.
person to talk about this, is bleed. The concept of bleed, which for those who don't know is when you either put too much of yourself into a character to the point that the
Mhm.
events that happen in the character have a real life impact on you, or you empathize with your character so much that you end up walking
Mhm.
away from a game, emotionally impacted or traumatized in some fashion, as is often the case in World of
Mhm.
Darkness, uh, on behalf of your character. So I'd be very interested to hear kind of what your thoughts are on this, because especially with the recent release of Bloodstained Love,
Mhm.
they had a big document about bleed, and some of it would miss the mark, some of it was a little bit on the mark. Kind of, what are your thoughts with your therapy background
Mhm.
in terms of bleed in gaming, and what are some kind of tips you would give to people to watch out for or things
Mhm.
people should be kind of aware of?
Um, I well, Bloodstained Love. Where do we begin with that book? I wish they would have called it something else, but it is what it is. With the bleed, I think of it like the stressor, the trauma of it, and I think of and what I've told my clients is thinking of things in a three-prong approach, being able to proactively kind of think of or identify what might happen. And I know that in Roll the Darkness, we can't always do that, but also kind of prepare yourself for what's happening in session. And then
Right.
your third prong is what are you going to do if it does happen? And I know that we don't, the world in our life and our unlife isn't in, you know, all or nothing kind of standards, but thinking of it as a spectrum of like, okay, how much do I need to prepare? And one of the things that I have also done with my clients, and I think it can be applicable in World of Darkness too, is I've used like the fishing idea of, where bleed is concerned, a little, somewhat, and then, a lot of bleed, that's fine, but it's what you do with the bleed that matters, and being able to be prepared and also giving yourself one more than one way to be prepared. And I've used like the fishing idea of like how when kids learn how to fish, originally like in the beginning people will have like a little Mickey Mouse pole or like a little Barbie pole. I don't know, Kent, did you ever have like a baby like child fishing pole back in the day?
I never
Or have
did,
you seen?
no.
Well,
I
they're
just
very
used real
common.
fishing poles. My
Okay.
dad taught me on an actual pole right away.
Because I am tiny, so, like, that was, like, my shtick, but, a lot of people learn on those, and then they build up, and then from there, if you're really into fishing, you might go on, like, a shark expedition or marlin fishing, and so if you've ever looked at how those boats are outfitted, they have, like, an actual chair with a seatbelt, and your fishing pole goes into a holster with a wire line. It's, like, buckled in, and I think, when we're looking at bleed or the stress or the pain that might come from that, what are the little, medium, and larger ways that we can address it? Because, you're not necessarily going to catch a shark with a Mickey Mouse pole, but also you need to be prepared,
Right.
and so what's going to happen in that session? Is it a little bit? Like, if there's only a little bit of stuff going on, we don't wanna go above and beyond thinking like, "I need to have 2 hours with a therapist to process this." But on the other end, you don't wanna have all of this bleed and then have no supplies or nothing prepared. And so kind of like being able to identify like what might cause bleed and how much effort you really need so that you don't
Knowing
feel
your
like you're
triggers, like, yeah,
yeah,
knowing the
but
things that could
also
potentially be
mhm.
problematic for you.
Right, but also knowing how much to apply and how much you need in those situations because you don't want to show up for minnows with a shark fishing boat, but you don't want to show up, fishing for sharks with a Minnie Mouse pole either. You're not going to get it. So when we're going into bleed and taking care of bleed, you're not going to want to say like, okay, well, I'm going to go straight into work after the session. Because I'll get like, I'll have a chocolate and I'll be fine. Or I'll have
Right.
a bath and I'll be fine. It's like, okay, because previously we would sit with people, like when we first were we had aftercare mods and we would sit with people for like 2, 3 hours and it got to the point where we're like, this is a lot. Like, what
Yeah.
can we do differently? And so at that point, those players at that point could have been like, wait, these things, if or when they happen to my player or my character, need this amount of care. And, not saying that there was anything wrong at that point. We had a lot of stuff going on. But anyways, in terms of bleed, I think that if you can look at your character and you can look at the small, medium, and large things that are happening and what you need in real life to like help with that, whether that's reaching out to your storyteller or getting off of the internet completely and then coming back to it or writing something or jumping in and being like, hey, does anyone want to process some stuff, you know, and just doing like
A
a
wrap
letter.
up or like a cool down or
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's something to be said too for doing for sourcing what's being
Mhm.
so triggering to you. Like, was it what
Mhm.
really happened in the game, or was it because it was reminiscent of something else that needs actual attention and actual work and
Mhm.
doing the work on those things?
Yep.
Like, I've never really had I mean, I can't say never. Never is too absolute, but I can't recall having any real serious issues with bleed. Like, would I get emotional? Sure. Like,
Mhm.
games can make you emotional. If they're not making you emotional, you're probably doing it wrong.
Mhm.
If you're not feeling any kind of investment, you might be in the wrong game.
Mhm.
But also recognizing, like, maybe this isn't the game for you. Maybe this
Mm.
isn't the table for you. Like, World of
Mhm.
Darkness, we've said it many, many times, isn't the world of happy, shiny puppies. Like, it's the
Yeah.
deep, gritty, dark, gross parts of the world, and
Mhm.
then you add a layer of monsters underneath it.
Mhm.
And so being able to say, like, hey, maybe this I'm not in the right headspace for this at all at this time in my life, or whatever the case may be, or that, if something happens that triggered you, sourcing, finding, and
Mhm.
resolving whatever that trigger is before returning to a game, or just at
Mhm.
least making some progress on it,
Mhm.
can be beneficial. Because I don't think empathizing with your characters is a bad thing. I don't think getting immersed in a game is a bad thing. I think there
Mhm.
just comes a point too where it's just like, maybe this isn't the right game, maybe this isn't the right table,
Mhm.
maybe this isn't, the right time in your life to be pursuing those kinds of things, if you don't take the proper precautions and preparations, like you
Mhm.
said, or do the work on yourself outside of it. Because at the end of the day, this is all fictional. This is just as fictional as a book. This is just as fictional as a movie. Like,
Mhm.
what you have to be able to have that certain level of detachment to enjoy it, but
Mhm.
enough immersion to also enjoy it. So
Mhm.
it's knowing those levels and balances very, very well.
Mhm.
So before we go ahead and wrap up this stream and hear any final thoughts that you have, I want to remind everyone again about our Dragon Ink Dice giveaway. Dragon Ink has been a wonderful sponsor since the revamp started. They provide amazing dice sets, and you could own a set of their dice of your very own. That dice right there on the far, far right end of the screen, that could be yours, and I will ship it out to you immediately. If you enter into the chat hashtag Dice Me Please, that's Dice Me PLZ,
Mhm.
you will be entered into the running for those dice, and they could be yours. And we'll go ahead and do that drawing right after we hear your final thoughts. Is there anything else you'd like to say, you'd like to put out to the people? I mean, we're probably going to do a follow up on this at some point, or a second part on this at some point. But anything you just want to put out there to the player base, to the community, to people who haven't, quite taken the leap and joined yet? Just anything.
Oh, just jump in, get in. You just have to start. It just takes one person. I've watched the community go from not existing to people meeting people that they're engaged to just by jumping into voice chat.
That's true.
I
That's
mean,
true.
really, we've seen people get connected in more than one way, in person and online, it myself included, and I couldn't have imagined any of it happening. Really, it's unpredictable because it's the world of darkness. But I don't want to say you get out what you put in, but
No,
if
I
you
would
put
exactly say that. That's actually what was going through my head right now. In any game, in any job, in any
Mhm,
community, in anything in
mhm,
life, you're going to get out of it what you put in. So if you don't take a
mhm,
chance, if you don't take a risk, if you don't put yourself out there, you will not make any progress. You'll stay exactly where you are. And if you're
mhm,
comfortable with where you are, by all means, stay there. But I think
mhm,
everybody wants something from this. And the only way
mhm.
to get that something is to take the chance. But anyway, continue what you were saying.
Yeah, there's just so many opportunities to be invested and engaged, and I know that we are a little bit more separated now, but we are definitely working behind the scenes. And by all means, please ask us questions if you have questions, because we have a lot of experience on the mod team. Kent has done a great job at finding people who either have a lot of experience or are know people in the community, and it's just a really cool opportunity. And I think that one of the things in the future, I hope to see is more storytellers, because I know that Kent and the rest of the people who are in the community gave me a place where I could go from not knowing anything to becoming a storyteller and running one shots and inviting people in. And I think that we've continued to create a server that has was able to shed any of the misdeeds or stereotypes you might have. And I think that if you wanted to learn, this is a great place to do that. If you're already planted here, great. Just let us know. We kind of have people brought up as mods so they can kind of learn the server and then go into storytelling. And I would love to see more people learn how to storytell. I understand that it's a big ask and it can be scary, but I went from not knowing anyone really. I mean, Kent and I never met. I went, so when I first joined the server, like people joke that I know a lot of people and I've invited a lot of people. It wasn't like that. When we first had the first 150 to 200 people, I didn't know anyone. I wasn't really in the VTM TikTok, and I've slowly dragged people in, lured them in, to the server, and now we're meeting up in person. We're sending gifts for birthdays, like just being connected in ways that wouldn't have happened had I and other people not felt comfortable, despite it being the world of darkness and the zaniness of it all. So I think that that is something worth, yeah,
100%.
mentioning.
And
Yeah.
as an add-on to that, as a nice little secret for everybody who stayed tuned in, we are looking to bring in some new mods. We are looking to promote some new
Okay.
storytellers. We're going to be talking about and making an announcement about it soon as to what we're looking for out of those individuals. But
Mhm.
as a heads up, sneak peek, the best things you can do to become a mod or a storyteller, if you have ambitions of
Mhm.
advancing on this server, is one, being active, being present, showing that you have an investment in this community. I mean, it's easy to stop by for your regularly
Mhm.
scheduled game or to check in once a day and not say anything. But for the people who show up and show out and are active in these streams, in those, in the server itself, they're going to get an advantage. They're going to be the ones that we're
Mhm.
going to be looking at closely because we're going to feel like we know them. Having
Mhm.
played with me once, having, been in a couple sessions with me, that's not going to get you a job.
Mhm.
Being a positive force for change and advancement and
Mhm.
positivity in the server is what's going to get you to the front of the line. Showing a knowledge of the rules, an understanding of the server guidelines, being a positive member of the
Mhm.
community is what's going to get you to the front. I mean,
Mhm.
one of the reasons Mimic is where she is because we talk every single day. Like, I don't think there's a single day that goes by that we don't at least exchange a couple messages. If I didn't see her active in the server, showing up to events, being in the game, asking for help when she needed it, and showing interest, genuine interest, not entitlement, not I deserve to be a storyteller because I've done this stuff elsewhere or whatever, not sending me a CV, but just being here listening to the things I say and asking questions, challenging me when I'm wrong, those kinds of things. That's what's going to get you a position. So if that's something you're interested in, start out by being present. Start out by showing up regularly, not breaking any rules, showing an understanding of things, hosting
Mhm.
events. Like that's what I'm looking for when I look for a moderator. And also stay tuned because we are looking for mods and being a mod is the only way to become a storyteller. So if you have an interest in being a storyteller, you have to serve as a mod first. And usually
Mhm.
we're looking for at least a 6 month commitment as a mod before we even consider bringing someone onto the storyteller team. So if that's up for you and you're interested in being a storyteller in a year's time or, whatever the case may be, maybe, maybe consider being a mod first because that's going to get
Mhm.
you, in the running to eventually become a storyteller. So I think it's time now for our dice giveaway. Like I said, that's from Dragon Ink Dice. You are going to be getting that set of dice featured on the far right side of the screen. That could be yours. All you had to do is enter hashtag dice me please. So we're going to go ahead and make that drawing now. The winner of the Dragon Ink Dice is Yathena Lynn. You have won the giveaway for that set of Dragon Ink dice. So I will be in touch with you very, very soon to get those dice. You can go ahead and DM me your mailing address and I'll get those shipped out right away to you. I have them right here. So all I got to do is run to the post office, get it in an envelope, and I'll have that shipped out to you hopefully within the next week. But congratulations to you, Athena Lynn. That comes to us. Big thank you to Dragon Ink Dice for giving us that donation to give away on this stream. And we really, really are appreciative of them. So thank you for tuning in, Yathena. Thank you for entering into that contest. I also want to encourage people to take advantage of our Adagio Tea offer. You can get either the Frenzy blend or the Torpor blend, Frenzy being caffeinated, Torpor being decaf, and you can find those at tinyurl.com/frenzytea or tinyurl.com/torporteas, and those will be in the description of this video when it's posted to YouTube and is highlighted on Twitch. So you'll be able to go straight to those, and we will get you, get you some of those teas, and all of the proceeds, a percentage of the proceeds, goes to charity. So we are not making any money off of this. This is just out of the goodness of our own hearts and to add another level to our St. Pete community, which so many of you have invested in so much. Also, I want to encourage people to go check out Mimic for Hire on TikTok. Our dear beloved storyteller Rebecca, our wonderful guest, our avid community member. You can go find her on Mimic for Hire on TikTok. I can say firsthand, her content is wonderful. It's hilarious. It's entertaining, and you will get quite a few chuckles out of it. So go give her a follow on Mimic for Hire, and go give her a follow on Sire for Hire. If you're just here for the VTM, if you don't need the D&D or Warlock talk or anything else outside of the VTM landscape, go check out her content on sire.for.hire on TikTok. Go give her a follow, show her your support. She is absolutely, absolutely wonderful, and we're so, so grateful to have her. Upcoming programming, we have on Sunday night, tomorrow night, episode 2 of Bloody Strings, which is Bera's table game. The game's getting into the meat of the story soon. And you don't want to miss out on that. There's not a lot of catch up to do. If you want to go see the episode 1, it's available here on Twitch or over on YouTube. So go check those out. But episode 2 will be airing tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Following that, on Tuesday, we have Rage Across Tampa, our Werewolf the Apocalypse Chronicle, hosted by yours truly. That is going to be at 10 p.m. Eastern. Then on Thursday, we've got the next episode of Don't Get Caught, the Anarch Coterie campaign hosted by Crafty Mirage. And then back here, we'll be on After Dark again next week. I don't even know who our guest is going to be. I don't even know what we're going to talk about. It's kind of a week-to-week thing sometimes, so you're just going to have to tune in to find out for yourself about what we've got coming up here. But you can always see the stream schedule on Twitch. It's all listed there, and you should stay up to date on all of that information. And if you're in the game, the more you watch the streams live, the more of those blood points you earn, and a chance to earn more XP, bonus dice rolls, taking away a hunger, all the good things that you can get just by watching the Twitches and cashing in those rewards. But Mimic, thank you so much for being here. I adore you. This wouldn't even still be here if it wasn't for you. So I'm so, so grateful to you for every single thing that you do. And I look forward to getting those episodes up for your game, the little synopses of the sessions in your games. So we'll be looking forward to posting those soon enough. But thank you all so much for tuning in tonight, and we will see you next time on St. Pete by Night After Dark. Have a good night, everyone.